We're on. All right. Well, welcome to the Actor's Voice conversations on singing and acting with Russ and John. Today we're hearing from Geraldine Anello. Um, Yay! I'm going to tell you a little bit about Geraldine. She's conducted Kinky Boots and School of Rock on Broadway, The Fantastics off Broadway, and played in orchestras of Broadway's School of Rock, Kinky Boots, Bronx Tale, Aladdin, and On the Town. She's also worked on Broadway productions of SpongeBob the Musical and American in Paris, as well as a host of off-Broadway theater. We also want to talk to her about her the theater music directors industry group, which is really a huge thing, and the professional advancement classes she has going on, and her new book. So welcome, Geraldine.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes. All right. So we should jump right in. Our first question is a really broad one. Can you tell us about your journey? How did you get started in music, in theater, and how did you wind up where you are now?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like it still surprises me to this day that like I am in New York City because I was born in France, grew up on a French island off the coast of South Africa called the Reunion Island. So super, super small, like 2 hours to drive from south to north, like super small island. I started piano there and then moved back to mainland France in my teens. Carried on there, did like a lot of, professional musicians do, which is, you start accompanying choirs when you're like 15, 16, you start teaching, and then the next thing you know, you're kind of like making money as a musician before you even tried. And then I got this scholarship to come for 9 months at Kalamazoo College. It was an exchange program, coming for 9 months. I was supposed to be like this French assistant, but of course I went to the music department, said you need an accompanist. They did. So I started working there. And then I never left. Like after those 9 months, I applied, did my master's at Western Michigan University, carried on, went to Boston University for my doctorate. And then after that, did little stints. I did a couple years in Rhode Island, a couple years in Virginia while working all over the US, and somehow finally landed in New York. And and then here I am. And then, I had this goal for, Broadway, and I got very lucky that people helped me make it happen because, you don't, there's a quote I love about this that says, you don't reach success, you get lifted up to success. And to me, that's how I feel. It's like, I can say all day long, like I got there, but I think really people pulled me up there, and I'm really grateful for them. So it's really unlikely. I mean, I don't know how a little girl from a random island of the coast of South Africa ends up in New York City doing what I do. Like I'm as much like surprised by that as anyone else.
That's amazing. So was Broadway always the goal, or were you doing classical stuff first, or?
I'm definitely classically trained. No one should ever hire me for a jazz gig, just full warning. I fully am classically trained. As far as was Broadway always the goal? Yes and no. I mean, I grew up in France, and there's not a culture of musical theater like there is in the US. And so when I was there, I loved theater and I loved music, and I did want to take theater, but it was too many like extracurricular activities, so I didn't do theater. I wasn't in that world. And the story goes, I think I was about 16. I randomly found this book at the music store, and it was called Les Miserables, which I knew because we studied it in school. Like, of course, Les Miserables by Victor Hugo. And I'm like, oh, somebody made songs out of it. What a cool idea. So I got the book, sight read the songs. I'm like, they're pretty good songs. Like, I'm sure people would like to see the story on its feet. And I'm like, well, but they're just songs. Like, we need to tell the story. So I got back to the book, picked out proper excerpts from the book to connect the songs, rallied my friends. We did 2 performances. And I remember vividly the second day before the performance, laying down like in a park. And I was like, this is a dream life. If only I would get to do something like that every day. But I did not know it was a real show. I did not know it was obviously the show we all know and love. I did not know about it. I did not know about musical theater. I did not know it was a job. I just like dreamt it before I knew it was a real possibility.
That's amazing.
So like how long was it between that moment of clarity, here's what I would love to be able to do, and when you found yourself actually doing that?
That's a good question. I mean, I think by the time I I was doing my master's because I was working at the university. I started getting hired for the shows as a musician. So I started playing key two, and that introduced me to, the world of patches and the world of just doing shows and being paid. In Michigan, it was like $25 a show. It was like really rough. It's like,
The truth
this I
hurts.
gone 3 hours, $25 a show.
Yep.
But I'd be playing it. We'd have a 3-week run. I got to see people music direct because I was in the band. So that was my first introduction. And then, summer jobs came around and I would just apply. And it was like, yeah, you're qualified. You have a master's in music. Sure, come like be this music director. And so I would do, summer camp stuff. And it just kind of progressed over time like that. So I couldn't pinpoint like one time, but it was over time.
That's really cool.
Sure.
Yeah. So that's a neat thing, I guess. And you always knew, obviously, coming up as a musician, that you wanted to do music professionally, and then theater was sort of kind of an organic outcropping of that. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so. I'm the kind of person, I have a lot of different interests. So I always feel like I always, and I'm very passionate, so I always love to like dive in whatever I'm doing. So music is one of those, but I've never done anything else. Actually, when I was, I think, 18, I applied to do this summer job back in France to do breakfast in a youth hostel. It was my first job interview. And I was so surprised, and I got it, and I felt like so proud of it. And I went to my mom and I said, Mom, I got this summer job. I'm going to do breakfast in the morning at this youth hostel. And she's like, you said you wanted to be a musician, no? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, well, then only do music jobs. And that was that. And like that never left. And I did not take the job, and I never did anything other than music. It was like, it does not matter what you do in music, but if you want to be a musician, go work in music.
That's neat. That's neat. Do you want to move on to our next one, John?
Yeah, I think I'm going to circle back to that one a little bit later in some of our later questions. We kind of covered our next question a little bit,
Okay.
so I'm going to skip ahead. But in your experience, what do you find is the most crucial aspects of training the voice or the aspiring actor, the singer, the speaker? Do you personally see any of these approaches being connected?
The approach of training the actor and training
the actor, training the singer.
Yeah, that's the first thing, right? You always have to sing the words, and I think that's something that is really hard for a lot of people when they're learning. But I think beyond that, something I've found, and that is very true in just piano, which does not even have words, I think in the training for a long time as a student, you are quote unquote under the material. It's like the material is carrying you along, and you're just kind of trying to keep up with the material.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there comes a time in training when you want to start shifting it, where now you're the one in charge of the material. It's like, who's the boss of whom here? And it's like, is the material in the boss of me because I'm scared of this high note, or am I the boss of the piece because I know exactly how I'm going to make it work? And I think it's something at a certain level that we always have to do with every single new piece. When you learn a new piece, no matter the length of it, no matter the difficulty of it, there's always the moment of I'm still under the material because it's still like I'm still being surprised by it. And for me, I know I'm ready with a piece when I can twist that around and I'm like, now I know exactly how this is going to go. And I know I'm going to make it happen that way. I'm in charge of it enough. And so I think for students, knowing that that's kind of like a goal and that can happen over years. So if you're going to start singing at 14 or 12, and that maybe that will happen around 19 or 20. But I find that's a conversation not many people have, that's a feeling that's hard to describe, but I think is key because some people will spend their entire career still somewhat under the material. And you really want to have that ownership. And when you're a student, maybe sometimes for 3 pieces, you're going to be under the material, and 1 piece, you're able to twist it around. But if you can recognize it when that happens and try to like get to that more and more often on more and more pieces, I think that's a really important place to find yourself in and to really like work on.
So what indicators do you notice when you see these singers, these actors who suddenly are on top of the material, they take ownership? How do you identify that moment where I know they've really got it versus the ones that they know it, but they're still being owned a little bit?
I don't know. I don't think it's like a very concrete technical thing. I think it's more of a feeling. You know, it's that thing you have when you're an audience member and you just relax in your seat because you know nothing's going to happen. Like that's going to be bad because you know that performer is really trusting themselves that it's going to happen. But that only can work with so much work and so much like, you know, like details on their end that then they're free in the moment.
I think that's huge. I don't know. I feel that way as a performer, especially when I was training in conservatory, and it's always classical styles, and a lot of times I felt um, intimidated by the music that I was being asked to perform. Especially in the opera worlds, there are still arias that just scare me to death, and I don't. It wasn't until later, as a performer, when I was grasping on to things that spoke to me a little bit more, and also things that I was able to identify with, whether that's classical or theater, when I started to, like you said, sing the words and identify with it. And when you feel comfortable, I think you said it, when you trust yourself, you sort of feel that in your singers, and that's an amazing thing.
Yeah, I think part of it is like when you're going to open your mouth and start singing, is it that you're finding that the sound that's coming out is the one that's just coming out, or is it the one you're intending on having right now? And again, it's so subtle and it's so hard when you haven't done both to understand what the difference is. But I think it's really where it's at. Like, are you making the sound, or is the sound just happening? You're the one making the sound. You don't like this sound. Like so many singers I'll talk to, I'm like, did you hear that thing here? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, why didn't you change it while you were doing it? And they're like, oh, and so oftentimes they don't know it because do we talk about it? Do we talk about it in universities? Do we talk about it? I don't know. I'm not 100% sure that we do.
So that brings me to an interesting question. You were primarily a pianist coming through. Did you, as you started to work with more singers, do any kind of extra training or extra, I guess, lessons or things like that? I mean, how much did you become more of a singer when you started working with singers?
Yeah, I did. I mean, I always loved singing. I think for me, my love of music is very related to me playing with singers.
Yeah.
You know, I never wanted to be a soloist. I never wanted to be a chamber music person. I very much, once I discovered the voice, and I discovered it by playing and singing by myself,
Sure.
and then like for other people, that's when it clicked for me. It was like, okay, I don't care in what capacity. We can be doing opera, because I did a lot of years of opera. We can do opera. We can do musical theater. I don't care. Like, as long as there's a singer there, I'm happy. Also true for drummers, but different conversation.
Well, that's interesting. So, because I've talked to a lot of pianists who, I mean, they may have sung themselves in choirs, even as a soloist, but when they start sitting in on lessons and they start seeing pedagogues working with singers, they start seeing teachers, they sort of develop a whole new toolkit. And
that's what it is.
I assume, I know you MD, and do you do a lot of coaching on the side, or do you really just work with people in the context of whatever show you're directing?
Yeah, I definitely do some coaching, but it's what you're talking about. I spent so many years sitting in so many voice lessons, hour upon hour upon hour upon hour. And so when you see that many voice teachers, you really start seeing what are the results? What is happening? How is this person growing? What is working and why is it working? And that there's so much value in that. And then on top of that, of course, you get to have, beautiful warm-ups that you take apart. You're like, ooh, this one really worked. And then you just kind of start like being able to have your own bag of tools that you can offer your singers.
Right.
I love the from the keyboard perspective, and I'm wondering, watching all these voice teachers, all these singers, seeing what's effective, seeing what's not. If you had to give like a top three, or what are some strategies, either for motivation or for training, that you saw to be highly effective from your perspective?
I think what I found in university for those like young years, something that's a little bit tricky is that a lot of voice teachers talk a lot about the importance of feeling the words. And and which is absolutely right, of course. And students, there will be a break where they will feel it, but it will not show. And I think that gap is quite a difficult one to navigate, because they're like, I'm doing exactly what I'm asked to do. I am feeling it. I did the work of the words. And then meanwhile, you're watching them and it's like, hello. And I think that there's a gap there that we can probably, as educators, do a better job helping them through that without it turning into mimicry, because that's also like the pitfall.
Right, and it's interesting to me, like as I think about that from like an acting pedagogy standpoint. I think about like your Stanislavski, and you can get so caught up in that, inner subtext, and are you not so much are you understanding the emotion of a piece, but are you actually getting that beyond yourself to
And I
your
think it's
audience?
hard. It's hard
That's
with opera.
that is an interesting divide. When it comes to acting a song, it goes deeper. Do
I
I
think
understand it, and then am I getting that out to people?
right, and I think it's hard for opera because so many songs are just so long. Mozart, we're gonna have 12 minutes of "I Love You." Like how much of a journey? Like okay, we got it. We're with you. What's next? I mean, one of my all-time favorite operas, which actually got the Pulitzer, and I can see why, is The Crucible, which is not very well known. But you know why? It's because it moves. The story moves, 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 moves. It never stops. And so by the end of each act, it's in 3 acts. You're like, everybody's in tears, the cast, the audience, because, well, A, it's a true story, but B, it's written in a way where you don't sit and it's not like, you know, and now I'm burning. I mean, that's just a terrible example, but you know what I mean? It's not that content. And I tried to think of something else.
It's terrific. Um, so it's interesting. Um, I think this is a nice next question. Was there a particular moment for you that affected you in your own singing or your own accompanying of singers, if whatever was more applicable, where you kind of finally figured something out? Like either how do I do this as a singer, or how do I help this singer? Is there like a moment where you can remember that kind of switch flicking?
I don't know. I mean, I know for me it's a little bit different because I was very much a singer growing up, and then moving to New York and working with the incredible talent here. I always said like the better vocal coach I became, the less of a singer I became because more and more I could see the difference. It's like, oh, but they're just so. I think when it comes to New York specifically and musical theater specifically, something that is really truly that makes a difference is that singers here can sing in so many different styles. The understanding and the interpretation of style is so on point. So you're gonna have one singer who's gonna do this like country version because they're auditioning for a country type show. They're gonna nail it. It's gonna be country, and then they turn around, in the same coaching to do a pop rock show. And now they're like rocking with growls and stuff like that. Then they turn around because now they have a third audition for My Fair Lady, and they're doing like popping high D. Like that's the kind of talent you have here. And I think having that ability to understand style and talk with them about style is really important, more than just at that level, they know technique, they know all of that. It's more like, are we using the technique correctly for the right style? And that conversation is really interesting here.
And that I find that fascinating, largely because of what you're saying. The teaching and MDing at that level is less about technique because there's an expectation that everyone who's walking in the door really has a solid foundation. And I think that's a really important message for students and teachers to know that, we're not just teaching one style, we're not just preparing on one level. It's really multifaceted, and the expectation is that you already know so much about your own voice walking in the door.
Well, New York City is people here work on new works all the time. And I think that's a big difference because when you're working in university, I mean, you're working on work you cannot change. So you may have a technical issue that's like, I can't actually reach this range, and that's going to be something you're going to have to work out because you are going to be performing that note that you can't really do. If you're in New York and it's a new work, that note you can't do, you're going to say to your composer, hey, or your MD, I'm not sure about this, and we're going to change the key, or we're going to change the melodic line. We're going to tailor it to you too. I mean, you can't have a 5-note range. These are all incredible people.
Yeah.
And that's true not just for actors, it's true for band members with orchestrations. They'll come in, they'll read the material, they're like, hey, I think there's this better like fingerings for violin. And it's like, oh, okay. And people make it do that here. No one here thinks, oh, we shouldn't adjust that. It's like, oh, thanks for letting me know. That is a better way to do it. So I think that's a big difference because we're not just throwing things that people can do and leaving them to figure it out. That's not what's happening either.
That's neat. I'm looking down my list here.
Right. So I want to go to a total side tangent just because you mentioned looking at fingerings or what might a band member bring to you. I'm thinking about what are the wide variety of skill sets you have to be a successful MD. What is your favorite part of that job? What really was kind of an unexpected perk of I found myself doing this. I didn't think I'd ever do that in my life, but I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, I mean, just a side note, the conversation with the band members usually goes to the orchestrator. So I am in the room, but they don't tend to come to me with those things because they're new shows. So the orchestrator is in the room for that reason. They're the experts in that. They know why anything is on the page, and they know how they want to change it. And so usually in a rehearsal for a new show here with an orchestra, you'll be running something, and then the musicians will, raise their hand, or depending on the size of the band. And the orchestrator, a lot of time, will either physically go to them and have a side conversation, which you will completely let be, you'll take that time to let them have that conversation, or it'll be like out loud and we can all hear it. But it's not something that usually, or maybe the orchestrator will have option. He'll be like, how about this or that? Do you have a preference? But it's not something I'm personally so involved with, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then you had a question. You did.
Yes. No. The question was what's an unexpected highlight? Something that you found yourself doing. You're like, I never thought I'd do this before, but it's really cool.
I mean, I come from classical, and I love pop. I love grooves. I love like all of that. And I wanted to take jazz when I was in high school, and it did not happen for a variety of reasons. But I really was pulled to that. Like before the US, my goal was, I'm going to go to Paris and I'm going to make it in the studio sessions, and I'm going to maybe tour with some of the major pop artists. None of that training that I had. And so I think for me, being able to be like, one of my big shows I did last year was Bat Out of Hell. And it's the musical from the actual Meatloaf album. And I was here with a 2-keyboard rig, and one is a Nord. And so half the time, in order to play it, you have to actually stand because it's going to move otherwise. You're there. And in order to get the proper slides, you're full on with your arms. And so you're standing in city center with 2,000 people in this open pit with a guy who's semi-naked and like having fake blood coming on you and confetti's all over, and you're sliding. It's like, can I get more rock star than that? Like in my world, I don't think I could. Others will, yes. But me, it's like, I'm coming from classical. There's no way I should be, like, anyone should have let me do this, but they're letting me, and I'm loving it.
No, it's awesome. It's a great way to put it. The diversity is just so striking, and I love talking about it because I think it's important for people to realize that even after you go to school and you've trained to do this thing that you think you're prepared for, you're not prepared.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, because I guess I answered that question as a keyboardist. I mean, that's what came to mind, is that rock star, but but for conducting, I think the thing is how different every show feels. People are always asking, oh, what is it to do the same show every day? It doesn't feel like that. You can play on a show a lot, but when you're conducting it, it always feels different because it is always slightly different. Like every cutoff is never exactly precisely the same. You really have to be right there watching until they do their pose, or whatever. So I think that's something that's surprising, the level of like complete presence you need always.
And you typically conduct from the keyboard?
I think I have most often, yes.
Okay. Good deal. Have you conducted outside of musical theater? Did you?
I don't think I have. I mean, it's such a different path. I mean, I would have loved to. I particularly love to conduct orchestras. A dream of mine would be to do Pop's concert, where you get like 15-member orchestra and you get all your like musical theater pop stars. I got to do that at Town Hall, and we had people like Sarah Bareilles and Ingrid Michaelson, and that was such a great experience for me. I love being on stage as a conductor. But yeah, I think, what was your question?
I said, have you conducted outside of the theater?
Right, so that was that. But yeah, because I was going to talk about classical. I would have loved to conduct classical, but in that world, the conductors are so completely groomed. Like you can't jump. There's no jumping. It's like you're going to be doing the summer assistant from the piano. Then you're going to be the next summer, maybe you're going to be like the first assistant. And then for a couple of years, you're going to be the accompanist of this opera. Then you'll be moved to associate conductor, and you do one a year. Then it's a very slow over time kind of path. And since for me, I kind of moved here and you know, I was not going to go through that path. I don't foresee that being able to happen. It's not as open as musical theater that way.
Sure.
But you know, no complaints.
Oh, absolutely. It's a different pathway. What was the first show you conducted? I mean, how did you kind of jump right into that?
I think for stick conducting, I did, let me see. Well, I have two that come to mind because one was a holiday concert at the Sandler Center in Virginia Beach, which is a big, like 2,000 seat hall. That was a brand new hall. And that was a holiday spectacular. I think we had 16 band members. Now they were all, and it was that very kind of poppy show. And because it was very kind of straightforward, technically I was standing there leading them, but it was mostly showing them the tempo and when the entrance was, and then just kind of letting them do their thing. Because I know the first rehearsal I was super prepared and I did a lot, and the contractor came at the end and he was like, you don't have to give as much, like we're a big band, we got it. It's like to them they probably were like, we don't even need you at all, but he was being cool. And so then it was more like, here we go, and then you just kind of dance because you're on stage, so that's part of the show, and then it's like, and we're gonna be done, and here we go. But so that was kind of one, because technically I was standing, but the real one where I actually was needed was a Drowsy Chaperone.
Yeah.
And I did that. We had the full orchestration. We had a lot of the actors from Broadway. This was a gala. Like, there's lots of galas here. We did the whole show from beginning to end. And that was great. I prepared like a mad woman. I mean, I marked my scores very, very clearly. I had about a week, I think, to prepare because it's New York. That's what happens.
Yeah.
I just conducted it every day, I think. At home, I just conducted it every day and just really got it in my body.
Yeah.
And then we had rehearsals, and then it was that.
That's awesome. You got it. You got another one here, Sean?
Well, while we're talking conducting and preparation, what is your preparation process?
I really like when I look at when I have the full score of a show I have not done yet that I'm not subbing for. I really like to look at it from the angle of every musician. So I'm like, who has not played for a while? Like, I have my red pencil and I'll put down arrows for all the cues, that are needed. And it's like, if I were that player, when would I get scared? when would I want a little bit of, confirmation that it's my time? And those are places I mark clearly, so I tend to be, I'll be small. And then when somebody needs something and I have one of those, which, when you have a big orchestra, like, it happens pretty fast. Like, it's like every other bar you're giving someone something, but to them, you're giving them something like twice in the whole show, depending on who it is. But, so I'll just, and then it's going to be really big. That's something that I really focus on. And then I mark a lot of the structure. So I'll do, I put like 8 bars and I put it in blue with brackets. So I can kind of get my eyes off from the score. I don't play from memory, but at least it's like, okay, I know what's happening here. And I put like the amount of measures across too. And then any kind of tempo change, same thing, like a big pencil, in a different color. And I write like really big, like 6/8, 5/8, when you have those, like every bar it changes. So
Yep.
It becomes very visual, very colorful, and just very, very clear that way. And if there's no color, I don't have to do anything. And if there's lots of color, I'm moving.
That's how I was taught when I started choral conducting, was colors, and everyone finds their own method, but it's neat to hear about other people's. Do you, Mark, do you find, this is an interesting question for me, that a lot of your actors, do they come in as they should, reading well, knowing their parts really well, or do you do a lot of coaching as an MD?
That's true for opera, but in musical theater, that is not the expectation. In musical theater, the expectation is for everyone across the industry that singers come and you're going to teach them.
Mm-hmm.
And no one really gets mad about that because that's the standard. That's the standard.
Right. So do you find, and it's interesting because I know that that's a big part of the MD's job on Broadway, is to teach the singers. Do you find that they need a lot of leadership from you as a conductor, or do you help them with entrances a lot? Are they strong readers?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of time is spent on all the big choir moments, right? You're going to spend a lot of time on your overture and your, or, you know, first big number and your last big number, you know, things like that. So then it's very important because the conducting is mostly getting them used to where you put the cutoffs, how fast and clear do you want the cutoffs. So, you know, when you're teaching and they're still like trying to listen to their part while they sing with other people, it's all so fast. They have so much to think about. So I think it really helps when you're playing, and then, you know, you'll give them cutoffs as you go, and you help them breathe by breathing with them, things like that. I mean, I think it's helpful.
Oh yeah, it's huge. It's great. And I guess, follow up to that. How long do you usually have with the cast to teach them parts?
It depends on the show, and it depends on like how long a rehearsal process you have, right? Because a lot of time it's going to be maybe 3 weeks, so you'll get 3 days, you know, maybe 2 days with the full cast, and then you'll go into like broken, like smaller section with your principals, while other people are working on choreography and staging, things like that. But, you know, some shows are much quicker, and in those cases, you know, hopefully they already know the show, have learned it, at least have a sense of what it is. So it depends. But you don't, I mean, I think you don't really try to nail it right away. You give them the parts, they're there on their phone, they're recording the parts. When you get it where they have, you know, their own lines and lines with others, then you kind of move on to another song, and then the next day you'll revisit. So they're doing homework, you know?
Yeah.
They're working hard, yeah.
Through that process, do you find that there are any regularly occurring weaknesses or issues with singers where they struggle to learn this material or that material?
I think it comes back to style. I've definitely seen people, as soon as they'll see riff in their part, they'll just get really scared. And I understand that. Like, if that's not something that comes naturally, like, why, you know, what do you do with that? You know, it's like if it's the same. I'm not from jazz. Like, if I see in my score, like, go for it, like, do what you want, I'm like, what do you mean do what I want? Well, I'll go get a coffee.
Ad libs, two scariest words, right?
Yeah. So so I understand them, and I'm happy to help, and like I'll give them, you know, options. I'll be like, here are some options, like record them. Here's just the piano, play with it at home, and I'll give them time. But sometimes they can get really scared with riffs. Even I've noticed riffs that are marked down. Sometimes they'll see lots of notes and they're like, it goes fast and I can't find the timing. Like so riff, and again, it's so style specific. I think I would say that's the big one. Other than that, across the board, most people are good with reading and stuff. The ones that are not quite, what happens is that they get very frustrated with themselves because they know that they're a little bit slower than everyone else, and they usually feel bad about it. And so then I feel bad about, like, for them, because it's like, oh, it would not be that much to learn to do that, and it would really help your own sense of like comfort in the room. Not even a matter of like, because I find they usually are harder on themselves than I am. You know, they'll be like, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. I'm like, that's called rehearsal. Like, that's what we're here for. It's okay. But they'll get really antsy if they're not getting it right away. And I find, I just wish I could help them through that, but there's really nothing I can do on my end to help them feel better with that. But that's something I've found. But most people are great. There's just those couple ones sometimes that need a little extra time.
Right. That's great. Cool. I'm just checking out my list here. So I think that it's really interesting. One of the things that, in addition to talking about, you know, professional expectations for singers and how it looks different from opera to MT and things like that, I think one of the things we universally have to deal with is the nature of the gig lifestyle, right? Whether that's as an actor and adjunct for faculty members at colleges, a private teacher, we all have to deal with that lifestyle. Can you kind of fill us in some of the benefits, some of the drawbacks, and what does that look like? Making it.
I think it's very different from musicians and actors.
Yeah.
I think it's a completely other, like, different beast. You know, I think part of the things that's great as a musician is you can kind of usually look whatever way you want, be whatever age you want. You know, can you play? Can you do it? Of course, it's a little bit like there's always, you know, it's not always going to be like that clear, like whomever we want to hire, we're going to hire. But, you know, it's, you're a musician. Doesn't matter as much what you look like a lot of times. But as an actor, it really does. And so I think, you know, for actors, it's a whole other, you know, most Broadway actors I know who have done amazing shows and amazing characters, you know, they're still having other jobs in between. And it's not at all anything related to them, their skills, or anything other than just the industry. And like I feel lucky because I get to be in the room when they're getting ready for auditions time and time again, and I'm just like, I can't believe I'm the one who gets to hear them, because the world should be hearing them. They're so good, and I'm that lucky person right now because they're not on a stage anywhere, and like, yay. Like, I got to have like a private, like, sometimes I feel like it's a private concert for me. I just happen to be playing it along, but I just feel really lucky. For musicians, it's different because there's, well, we'll see after this whole situation, but so far there's been a lot of work for musicians in New York City. For musicians, I think it really depends where they are locally located. A city like Boston is not the best city to be a professional gig musician. It's very specific on styles. It's like, do you do Baroque and do you do opera and musical theater? And then no. I mean, there's some jazz, but the thing with Boston is they have so many amazing music schools in all those styles, and those musicians need experience. So they're out there working kind of for free or very low. So it's harder for professional musicians to break through. While in New York City, it's like, there's always a lot of work. People have a lot of work and they're always passing work to other people. So it's fun. It's nice because you're a community. You're not taking jobs from anyone. You're giving jobs to everyone. It's nice.
Yeah. So you're dealing with an abundance of jobs and a supportive music community. I think that's huge. I know for actors, they do, they get most of their gigs through, casting calls and things like that. Do you have a central forum where your musicians go? Where do you have most of your work?
Complete network.
Complete network.
I mean, it's some, there are exceptions. There are exceptions where, there are a couple auditions here and there sometimes. Yeah. You could get gigs like, wedding gigs, things like that are not through the network. Yeah. Cocktail gigs, stuff like that. You can find some online. So it's not like it's not possible, but definitely without a strong network, and just to be clear, because people are confused with network all the time, it's really about quantity. How many people do you know? Period. The more, the better. It doesn't have to be music. They don't have to be above you in the food chain. Just how many people do you know? Boom, done. That's your network. But yeah, that really helps.
That's great. Do you have a particular kind of career? You talked about aspirations, maybe doing some symphonic or orchestral conducting. Do you have a particular highlight or other aspiration that for your career, something you want to do next?
I mean, for me, I think at this point, what really matters and what I spend a lot of my time thinking about is how to help people like the way I wish I had been helped when I was getting started. I had a couple years where I was living in Rhode Island between the doctorate and moving to New York, and there was no jobs there. So I mostly didn't work too much while I wanted to. And I remember just thinking, well, is pop playing an option for me? Like, would I have the skills? What is that lifestyle? I didn't really know. I was like, well, I know I have this dream of Broadway, but is that even possible? And if so, how? There was no information. I mean, I would Google that, and there was nothing on any like specifics. And I really wanted that. And so that's why I ended up working at that time. That's when I started the book that I'm writing that's coming out very soon, because it's called Music Sessions. Because
perfect segue. Yes, I love it.
Well, because it really came from that time in Rhode Island, because I was looking online and I was like, I can't find that information. So I was like, I'm going to go to the best musicians in all the different fields, and I'm going to ask them what it took, not only for them to get there, but to make a career. Because all the information is, how do you break in? Okay, fine. But then what happens after that? What kind of life do you have as a musician for 3 or 4 decades of your life? And I was interested in that as well. And so I started interviewing people who were playing for, Katy Perry and Taylor Swift and Kanye, and also people who were playing on Broadway and people who were playing for the Metropolitan Opera, military bands, just kind of across the board of like, what is it to be a musician at the top level of whichever like segment of the music industry, and what is that like? And so for me, a lot of my work has really been like talking back to who I was then and being like, here's what you wanted then, and giving that to the people who are in that position now.
Awesome. And just, because it's a good plug for the book, you said your book was called Music Sessions, Unplugged and Unfiltered with A-List Musicians. Yeah. When is that coming out?
I think it's coming out. I mean, the confinement did put a little bit of changes in that release date, but in the next few months.
It's great.
So, yeah, I mean, I'm really, it's funny because you call it a plug for the book, but for me, I really think of it as this true, like in one book, you get to know what the different paths are. You know, what is it going to do to your life? If you are equally thinking of like, okay, I'd like to go be like a pop rock, play pop rock tours, and you're thinking, but I also want to do Broadway, and you're debating, well, now you're going to see like which one is more likely to happen for you and why. And also if they both can happen for you, which one matches your personality and the way you want to live your life the best.
Cool. Awesome. You got anything you want to add, John, before we ask our last one here?
I think we get to our wrap up here.
I think so. You want to go ahead?
So let's talk about current projects or collaborations. What do you have coming up? If things are coming up at any point, are you doing anything digitally? What are you interested in? What are you working on next?
Yeah, I mean, Bad Out of Hell was going to go on tour, so I'm hoping that is postponed and will happen because I love being that version rock star that I can never be anywhere else. Yeah. But I think besides that, with the confinement, I spent so much of my time exactly doing what I was talking about, which is really trying to help people make it. And like the way I'm doing it besides the book is by organizing classes where people, wherever they are in the world, can learn from Broadway professionals. And that's something that, you know, I spend hours every day working on because, you know, I spend a lot of time on curriculum and finding the right topics and the right format and the right people to teach. Because when you have people who are not educators by training, you know, it's a different thing to all of a sudden be in charge of a class. So I spend a lot of time talking about that and then spreading the word. And you know, it's really satisfying to see people who are like, wow, I would have done nothing. And instead I took this class and like, oh, I can't believe I'm in Australia and I'm getting to learn from the best on Broadway. And like, that's something that my heart is very, very much with, that fulfills me so completely. So I really love that I get to do that. And that's something that I look forward to, you know, trying to reach more people with it too, because I mean, again, like who I was then would have just died to just be able to learn from someone on Broadway. And I was just in Rhode Island, but at the time, you know, you couldn't even be in New York City and talk to someone on Broadway. Live alone, like have them teach you the ways. And I just am still in awe that it's possible. I'm like, what do you mean you're in Australia taking a class with a Broadway person? How does that work? And I'm like, oh yeah, I made it happen. That's nice. But what? How cool? Like,
it really is. I get updates in my inbox probably, I don't know, at least once a day from Geraldine and what classes are coming up and the, you know, classes with Broadway professionals, conducting, Ableton, finale, everything. What you're doing is really pretty phenomenal. And I hope it does get out to a wider audience. If we can help with that, that's something I want to do for sure.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been really nice because people have been really, they've been really coming out of their way to message me daily and say thank you, which has been helpful because sometimes I'm, you know, I don't know, I want to make sure it's helping people. Yeah. And so it's been really nice that I just get messages of people saying, thank you for organizing the classes, even though I'm not taking it because I'm on another level, like that's really helpful. Or people are like, thank you so much. I'm on my 5th class this month and I love it and I'm learning so much. And wherever they are, it's so nice. Like that community is so supportive and filled with love. And that's I mean, that's the ultimate, right? That's our mission at Theater Music Directors, lead from the heart. And that's what feels right.
Yeah, it's been a really neat experience, just getting to know the forum and of course getting to know you. So
thank you.
I thank you so much, John. Do we have any other questions here at the end here?
Well, we just have the one final question, which is, what advice would you give to a young singer or actor as they're getting started?
Practice.
Universal.
I think it's okay to lean into your interests. I think a lot of people are so like really wanting to do right and they do practice a lot and work hard. But I think, you know, if all you want to do on your free time is listen to folk music, then there's going to be something you can take out of that. So maybe sing that, maybe like, it's okay to also lean into your own interests. Like you feel like you want to do improv, do that. Or you want to get this like clown workshop, do that. Like whatever weird, because that's what makes you interesting too, that you're not just cookie cutter coming out of a school. So yes, follow that main path because it's a good one, but also allow yourself to have those other interests and like that they're not distractions. They're actually completely going to make you more interesting as a performer.
Right. So
I love that.
I like that too. That's a great way. It's a great place to for us to wrap up. Again, thank you so much, Geraldine. This has been a pleasure.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, nice to meet
Thanks
you
for
in
being
person.
here.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.